So right now I'm back looking at the React Router documentation. I don't necessarily want to go too deep onto or into React Router yet, but I do want to be mindful of the different things that I'm able to do with React Router while I'm looking at refactoring the rest of the GraphQL data. Something that I noticed is this data loading API that's relatively new to me. I just changed the router for my application based on the use navigation hook. What they recommended was this create browser router functionality instead of, let's see, they recommended create browser router instead of what I had it before, which was using a browser router component. And I think this can actually be extracted outside of this component, which might be better for performance. I'm not sure if it makes a difference, but I saw them do it in the documentation. Right now, can be admin is true because just doing this locally. Eventually, I'm going to want to evaluate the different permissions that I have and also remove can be admin. Actually, I'm going to do that now. Can be admin. Still works. Yep. Skeleton UI with suspense. That's a good idea. And I feel like I should have skeleton components for each of the sections and consider the different states of all of the components that I'm dealing with. So what does that mean? Create, read, edit, delete should have their own states, I believe. And those states should be dependent on the route. So here, instead of the scene home, where it's admin/scenes, and then there's the create and edit form. Let's see, does that do anything? Scene create. Yeah, not currently because there aren't any scenes. Or users. Anyways, and something to consider. Data mutations. HTML forms. Interesting. React Router supports HTML form workflows with client-side routing. Let's see how I'm approaching forms. I went with a relatively custom solution because it's a little bit easier for me to hook into the specific events. But if I don't need to, inner form component. Should be named form. On submit, state.submit. Form. This is weird. I don't know why I did that. Form context state dot submit, and I think the only place that I'm using that is in this unsubmit handler, and that's I hate that. I don't think that I need that either. We'll see if that has any effects. Also, make sure use reducer, form reducer, see if that has a specific type. Returns. Doesn't mention submit or dispatch. So I don't know why I did that at all. There's some weird logic here. That's weird. Gonna get rid of that too. Because I want to make sure I actually evaluate the stuff that I'm doing. So I'm going to need to update these data types at some point. But for the time being, I just want this to be a little bit easier for me to reason through. Value, the data changes, serialize the dispatch on form context. It's weird. Shouldn't be a dependency. Has changed, get change key, form context state, get change key. Why is that? This is such a strange way for me to approach this. So, okay. I also remember there was something weird with the buttons. So just generally, I think I want to reevaluate the way that I'm approaching forms. especially in response to um, recognizing that React Router supports HTML forms in a pretty elegant way. So I am going to think about that for a bit. Okay, busy indicators. Ah, there's an actual form element. So maybe I don't want this to be named form. I'll have to think about this. Because I don't necessarily care to use form data, but I like the idea of what is fetcher? Yeah, I like the idea of being able to have the APIs relatively consistent because I also know that I'm going to want pure HTML versions of some of these pages. Fetchers. Interesting. Toggle complete. That's good to know. Error handling. Do I have any on clicks? Yes. So that's something that I can look into. These buttons should have routes. And better error handling. Okay, waiting for data to load before scrolling. So that's one of the advantages of using the data API. What's that called? Data loading API. Native links, relative links, data loading hooks. Okay, so for the time being, I'm going to spend some time thinking about how I want this application form to be. Because right now I have this as a widget. And I need to think about how much I want to reinvent the wheel. Application form can submit and type submit buttons, form items. Buttons. Button container has changed. Buttons. Map has changed. So I don't know why I did this. There are a few things that, looking back, were more complicated than I'm sure at the time, because I wasn't really getting into using these libraries. Like, I didn't really want to think about it. I didn't put a lot of effort into actually using the features of the libraries. So now is a good time to reflect on the ways that I want this to interact with GraphQL. Because for the most part, I have the queries centralized. I have the list of features that exist and the forms that exist. So for each one of these events, or for each one of these entity types, there is a way for me to iterate over what they consist of and actually think critically about how I want them to relate to each other. So I'm going to spend some time actually just playing around with the code outside of me recording myself, and then come back and be a little bit more, well, hopefully more concise. So I'm not even going to commit this yet, because I don't necessarily believe I'm going to stick with the form structure that I have been using. It's pretty convoluted.